Say goodbye to the fish, my brother Marcus whispered as he pushed me out of the helicopter. The biting wind of the Colorado mountains tore his words of protest as I plummeted toward the frozen lake, 3,000 feet below. During the 15 seconds of free fall, a single question hammered in my mind. How the hell did I not see this coming? My name is Leo Harrison, I'm 42 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed that blood meant something. That family was sacred. That my younger brother would never be capable of murdering his for money. $1 billion changed that perspective quickly. The morning had started out perfectly. Marcus called me personally, not through her assistant, which should have been my first warning sign, inviting me on what he called a celebration flight in his new helicopter. Leo, I want to celebrate your recovery from heart surgery, he said, his voice laden with what I mistook for genuine affection. Just the two of us, like real brothers. I was recovering from bypass surgery 2 months ago. And honestly, I was desperate for any sign that Marcus still wanted me around since our father Robert died 3 years ago, leaving me with the family tech empire. Things felt different between us, colder. So I dressed carefully that morning, putting on my favorite brown leather jacket, the one Robert always said made me look confident, and took a taxi to the private airport. The helicopter was magnificent, a gleaming machine that probably cost more than most people's houses. Marcus greeted me on the tarmac with a hug that felt rehearsed, while watching from the cockpit with a smile as sharp as broken glass. Isn't she beautiful? Marcus asked, gesturing to the aircraft. $250,000 of pure engineering. I'm thinking of buying it outright next month. What he didn't mention was that he had bought it with the money I had given him to invest in his consulting firm last year. $3 million that I was beginning to suspect had never seen the inside of any business account. The first hour was pleasant enough. We flew over the Rocky Mountains, Colorado stretching out below us like a perfect postcard. Marcus poured scotch and talked about his plans to expand the business, about how he wanted to renovate the family home, my old home, which he had transferred to her after Robert died because I thought simplifying my life in the apartment would be better. But then Marcus started asking questions, casual at first, about my will, about the trust arrangements, about whether I had considered making changes to simplify things for him. It's just that inventory can be so complicated, Leo, he said, filling my whiskey glass with a little too much enthusiasm. We want to make sure everything is taken care of. That's when I realized he was filming me with his phone. Not openly, but holding it at an angle while pretending to take selfies, capturing her on camera as she drank, as she talked about financial matters, building some kind of evidence. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. The surgery I had. He insisted on handling all my paperwork afterward. The power of attorney documents he brought to the hospital, claiming it was only temporary, just to help with the bills while I recovered. The way his financial advisor stopped returning his calls. Marcus, I said carefully, setting his glass aside. I'd like to go home now. That's when his mask slipped completely. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Leo. Her voice was different now. Harsher. You see, we need to have a conversation about your health, about his memory problems. Memory problems? I was sharper than both of them put together. You've been showing signs of dementia, he added, moving closer. We've documented it. The doctors agree that you are no longer capable of managing his financial affairs. That's absurd. But even as I said it, I realized how carefully they had orchestrated everything. The helicopter was thousands of feet up. No other aircraft in sight. Just the two of us, the mountains, and his plan to convince me to sign everything or... Leo, we're trying to help you, Marcus said. But his eyes were cold as winter. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I stood up slowly, my heart still sore from the surgery, but my mind crystal clear. What if I refuse? That's when Marcus smiled. He actually smiled for the first time all day. Well, elderly man, recent heart surgery, probably took a lot of painkillers, got disoriented in the helicopter. He shrugged. Tragic accidents happen all the time. I had raised this man since he was a baby, taught him to ride a bike, paid for his college education, his wedding, and now he was standing there agreeing as he planned my death. You're crazy if you think you're going to get away with this. Actually, Leo, we've thought this through very carefully. Marcus took out a folder of documents. Her signature here, transferring all assets to me immediately for her own protection, and we all go home happy. I looked at the documents, at my brother's expectant face, at his phone, still recording. Then I looked at the mountains, vast and dangerous, and somehow less frightening than the person who was supposed to love me. Go to hell, I said. That's when Marcus moved behind me and whispered those words about the fish. The push wasn't violent. They were too smart for that. Just a sudden jolt when I was off balance, looking at the water. As I fell, I heard Marcus shouting, "Leo. Oh God, Leo." But I also heard her lower voice talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, we'll need you to file the emergency petition first thing Monday morning. He's clearly not competent." Then the icy water closed over my head, and I had bigger problems than her betrayal. I'm a strong swimmer. Robert and I used to do laps together every morning, but the cold shocked my system, and my clothes were pulling me down. I kicked off my shoes and broke the surface, gasping for air, just in time to see the helicopter speeding away. He really was leaving me there to die. If you're enjoying this story of family betrayal and revenge, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how my supposed death would become the catalyst for the most devastating downfall Marcus could ever imagine. That's when I spotted the fishing boat. Captain Jake Morrison was exactly the kind of man who would jump into the icy waters of the Rocky Mountains to save a drowning older brother. 60-something, weathered by decades on the lake, and possessing the kind of moral compass that seemed to be missing from his own family tree. "Holy cow, man, what happened to you?" he asked as he and his teenage grandson Tyler pulled me into his fishing boat. I was shaking uncontrollably, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely speak. Jake wrapped me in a blanket that smelled of salt and motor oil while his grandson started the engine. "My brother," I managed to say through chattering teeth. "He, the helicopter, we saw them take off like a bat out of hell," Jake said grimly. "They didn't look back once. What kind of people leave someone floating in the middle of a lake? The kind who inherit $1 billion if I'm not around to stop them," I thought. But out loud I just said, "the kind who aren't really family." Jake contacted the Coast Guard while Tyler wrapped me in another blanket. "This is the Molly Sue. We have a man we pulled from the water about 12 kilometers southeast of Boulder. He's conscious, responsive, but needs medical attention." "Wait," I said, grabbing Jake's arm. "Please don't let them know you found her." "Not yet." Jake studied my face with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen enough of life to recognize when someone was running from more than just cold water. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Yes, but not the kind you're thinking." I took a deep, shaky breath. "I need to get to the coast without anyone knowing I survived. Can you help me?" Tyler looked at his grandfather uncertainly. "Grandpa, shouldn't we?" "Should and shouldn't are funny things," Jake said slowly. "Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't seem to follow the rules." He turned on the radio again. "Coast Guard, this is Molly Sue. False alarm on that rescue. Turned out to be debris in the water. All clear." As we headed for a small private dock Jake knew about, I told him everything about Marcus and Vanessa, about the money, about the papers they wanted me to sign. Jake listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with every detail. "So they figured they'd rather be rich orphans than broken kids with a living brother," Jake said when I finished. "Apparently. What is he going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I was officially dead as far as Marcus knew. He would return to shore, call the authorities, report my accidental fall from a helicopter, play the grieving brother while executing whatever legal documents they had prepared. But here was the thing about being supposedly dead: it gave you options you never had while you were alive. "I'll let them think they've won," I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "And then I'll destroy them." Jake smiled for the first time since pulling me out of the water. "Now that sounds like a plan worth helping with." Tyler dropped us off at a small dock in a cove I'd never seen before. Jake knew a woman there who ran a small bed and breakfast. No questions asked. Just cash. Mrs. Chun, a sturdy-looking woman in her 70s, took one look at my soaked state and immediately started heating up soup. She didn't bat an eye when Jake explained that I needed a place to stay off the books for a while. "Honey, I've been running this place for 30 years, she said, pouring chicken broth into a bowl. "I've seen people running from all kinds of things. As long as you're not bringing violence to my door, you're welcome." That night, while Marcus was presumably filling out police reports about his tragically missing brother, I was sitting in Mrs. Chen's kitchen wearing borrowed clothes and planning his downfall. Jake had agreed to be my eyes and ears. His boat was legitimately used for chartered fishing trips, which meant he was often around the marina where Marcus kept her helicopter. He could monitor his movements, listen in on her conversations, maybe even do some investigating on his own. "Here's what I don't understand," I said, pouring my third cup of coffee. "How were they planning to make this look legal? Even if he died accidentally, there are procedures, investigations." "That's what's been bothering me too," Jake agreed. "They had to have more than just forged papers. Someone on the inside." That night, I made a list of everyone who had had access to my financial information since Robert died. My lawyer, my accountant, my financial advisor, the bank managers, the trust officers. Someone was feeding Marcus information, helping them plan this, and I was going to find out who. But first, I needed to know exactly what story he was telling about his disappearance. Mrs. Chun had an old computer with internet access, and I spent hours reading news reports about the tragic helicopter accident that claimed the life of prominent businessman Leo Harrison. The articles painted a picture of a grieving family dealing with the declining mental state of an elderly man. Marcus was quoted extensively talking about my confusion and memory problems in recent months. Apparently, I had shown signs of early dementia since his heart surgery, making him dangerous to himself and others. They even included a photo. He at Marcus's birthday party last year, looking slightly confused while holding a drink. I remembered that moment. I was confused because no one had told me it was a surprise party, and I had arrived at what I thought was a quiet family dinner to find 20 strangers in his old house. But in the photo, I just looked lost and old. Exactly the image they wanted to project. The obituary was already online. Leo Harrison, beloved brother and dedicated businessman, passed away in a tragic helicopter accident while enjoying an outing with her devoted family. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations to the Alzheimer's Association. Even in death, they were spinning the narrative of my supposed mental decline. "Bastards," I muttered, closing the laptop. Mrs. Chun looked up from her knitting. "Planning something special for him?" "Oh yes," I said. "Something very special indeed." The funeral was surprisingly well attended for someone who was supposedly dying of dementia. I watched from afar through binoculars Jake had borrowed from his fishing gear, hidden behind a maintenance shed that gave me a perfect view of the proceedings. Marcus spared no expense. Premium coffin, empty of course, elaborate floral arrangements, a professional program with my photo on the front. He stood beside the grave in perfectly coordinated black, accepting condolences from friends, business associates, and people I barely recognized. "See anything interesting?" Jake whispered, crouching down beside me. "Besides my brother giving an Oscar-worthy performance? Look at who's not there." Jake adjusted his own binoculars. "Like who?" "His financial, the people who would normally be at the funeral of a billion-dollar client are nowhere to be found. Maybe they're busy with estate matters. Maybe. Or maybe they can't look people in the eye while they're part of this scheme." After the service, I watched Marcus work the crowd like a politician, shaking hands, accepting hugs, playing his part perfectly. But I also noticed how quickly he dismissed people when someone started asking detailed questions about my last days. That afternoon, Jake drove me back to Mrs. Chen in her pickup truck, taking a roundabout route to avoid any chance encounters. I had been officially dead for 4 days now, and I was beginning to understand the unique advantages of my situation. But as I watched Marcus accept sympathy for a death he had orchestrated, a new understanding crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and the kind of person he had become when he thought no one was watching. And tomorrow, I would begin to show him exactly what happens when someone underestimates an older brother who refuses to die quietly. The real war was just beginning. "I need to get into my old house," I told Jake the next morning as we ate breakfast in Mrs. Chen's kitchen. "That sounds dangerous as hell, Leo. He's probably living there now, right?" "Not according to the property records I looked up this morning," I replied, pulling out a piece of paper where I had jotted down some notes. "He's kept the place himself. My house has been empty since I moved into the apartment last year. But here's the interesting part. Someone has been paying the utilities, electricity, water, heat. Someone is maintaining it." "Why would they do that if no one is living in his house?" Jake asked. "Good question. I think it's time to find out." That night, Jake dropped me off 3 blocks from my old house in Beacon Hill. The house where I had lived with Robert for 35 years, raised Marcus, hosted countless dinners and holiday celebrations. The house he had transferred to my brother because he thought family meant something. It was after midnight, and the street was quiet except for the occasional car passing by. I still had my key. Marcus never thought to ask for it back, and I slipped through the back door like a criminal breaking into his own former home. The house felt different. Not exactly empty, but wrong somehow. I walked through the familiar rooms using the flashlight that Jake had given him, being careful to avoid the windows facing the street. The living room was covered with sheets, but I could see that new pieces had been added. Expensive pieces. A leather sofa that cost more than most people's cars. An entertainment center that definitely wasn't there when I lived here. In the kitchen, the refrigerator was stocked not with the basics he would keep in a house he visited occasionally, but with fresh food, expensive food, imported cheeses, organic vegetables, the kind of premium items that suggested regular occupancy. But it was in the home office, Robert's old study, where I found what I was really looking for. The desk was covered with documents, legal papers, financial statements, and most damning of all, a detailed timeline of what they called Project Leo. My own name turned into a code word for my elimination. I photographed everything with the disposable camera Jake had given me, my hands shaking with rage as I read his plans. He had been working on this for over a year, carefully documenting what he claimed were signs of his mental deterioration. Doctor's appointments where he was instructed to appear confused. Social situations where he was set up to appear disoriented. The photo from the birthday party in the newspaper. He deliberately didn't tell her it was a surprise party, so they could capture his confused reaction. The medication mix-up I had 3 months ago, which landed me in the emergency room. They had switched his pill bottles. Every moment of confusion, every instance where I appeared unbalanced or forgetful, had been carefully orchestrated and documented as evidence of dementia. But the most chilling document was a letter from someone signed only as MT, apparently one of his co-conspirators. The timeline needs to be accelerated. Leo has been asking a lot of questions about the power of attorney documents. If he becomes suspicious and seeks out a lawyer independently, everything falls apart. I recommend moving to Phase 3 within the next 2 weeks. Phase 3, according to the timeline, was his death. I was photographing the last document when I heard a car door slam outside. Headlights swept across the front windows, and I heard voices approaching the front door. Marcus was returning home from her morning performance. I quickly gathered my things and headed for the back door, but I could hear his conversation as they entered. "Do you think Mrs. Peterson believed us?" She was too upset to think straight. Besides, what is she going to investigate? Leo fell out of a helicopter. It happens. What about the will? How long until we can? The estate opens Monday. MT says we'll have full access to the accounts in 6 weeks. I slipped out the back door and into the garden, my heart racing. But as I crept along the side of the house toward the street, I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. A baby crying. There was a baby in my old house. Marcus never mentioned having a child, which meant there was more to this story than I realized. The baby changed everything. As I crouched behind the rose bushes I had planted 20 years ago, listening to the sound of a child crying in my old house, I realized this wasn't just about his money. It was about something much bigger. Jake picked me up at the corner 15 minutes later, and I was still shaking as I climbed into her truck. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "Worse." I saw my replacement. I told him about the baby, about the documents, about the mysterious MT who seemed to be orchestrating everything. "A baby," Jake repeated slowly. "They never mentioned having a child. Never. And Marcus always said that he and Vanessa weren't ready for kids. Said they were too focused on her careers." I pulled out my disposable camera. I need to get these photos developed, but not anywhere they might have connections. Jake knew a guy in Gloucester who had a 1-hour photo shop and didn't ask questions. While we waited for the photos, we sat in Jake's truck drinking coffee from a gas station and trying to piece together the puzzle. "So he's been planning this for over a year," Jake said, studying my notes. "Systematically making you look incompetent, documenting everything, getting someone inside his financial team to help them. And now there's a baby involved, which means either he's been lying about having children or..." I stopped. Another possibility occurred to me. Or the baby isn't his. "What do you mean?" Think about it. If they've been planning to steal my fortune, they'd want to make sure they have a legitimate heir, someone to inherit everything if something happened to him. But they'd need a child with the right lineage, the right legal claim. Jake looked at me with concern. You think they stole a baby? I think they did something. And I think MT, whoever that is the key to understanding what. The photos were devastating when developed. Clear evidence of her year-long conspiracy, complete with timelines, fake medical reports, and financial projections showing how they planned to spend his money. But the most disturbing photo was the last one. A birth certificate I almost missed, hidden under other papers. Baby Harrison, born 3 weeks ago. Mother Vanessa Harrison, father Marcus Harrison. But I was with Vanessa just 4 days ago in that helicopter. She definitely wasn't recovering from childbirth. This birth certificate is fake, I told Jake, completely fabricated. So whose baby is it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Mrs. Chen's guest room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything I had learned. My brother had spent over a year systematically destroying my reputation, plotting my murder, and forging documents to steal my fortune. And now he had a baby whose existence he was hiding from the world. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised me with her intensity. I'm going back, I told Jake over breakfast. But not to the house. I'm going to follow him. That's dangerous as hell, Leo. If he sees you, they won't because as far as they know, I'm fish food. I spread a local map on Mrs. Chen's kitchen table. Look, he has to take the baby somewhere during the day. Daycare, babysitter, something. Babies don't just disappear for 8 hours while his parents play grieving family. Jake studied the map doubtfully. And what do you hope to find? The truth about this baby and hopefully MT's identity. Mrs. Chun, who had been listening quietly while washing dishes, finally spoke up. There's a private investigator in town who owes his favor to me. Professional, discreet, and very good at following people without being seen. I can't involve anyone else in this, I protested. Darling, Mrs. Chun said, drying her hands on a dish towel. You're past the point of being able to handle this alone. These people tried to kill him. He won't hesitate to try again if they find out he's alive. She was right, of course, but hiring a private investigator would require admitting to more people that I wasn't really dead. It meant expanding the circle of people who knew my secret. What kind of favor does this investigator owe him? Mrs. Chun smiled mysteriously. The kind where my grandson didn't go to jail for something stupid he did when he was 22. At noon, I was sitting in Danny Crawford's small office above a sandwich shop in downtown Gloucester, telling my story for the 3rd time in a week. Danny was about 50 with prematurely graying hair and the kind of alert eyes that missed nothing. So you want me to follow his brother, find out about this mysterious baby, and identify his co-conspirator, he summarized after I finished. That's right. And what are you paying me with? Because according to the newspapers, all your assets are frozen pending inventory. I pulled out an envelope I had prepared earlier. Cash. I had some emergency cash stashed in a safe Marcus didn't know about. Robert always insisted we keep liquid funds available for emergencies. Danny flipped through the bills, enough to cover 2 weeks of surveillance, and nodded. I'll need photos of the targets and any addresses where they might be staying. I gave him everything I had, including the photos from my break-in. Danny studied them carefully, paying particular attention to the documents with the mysterious MT signature. This handwriting looks familiar, he said, pulling out a magnifying glass. Professional, but with some distinctive characteristics. Do you mind if I run this through some databases? Do what you need to do. One more thing, Danny said as I was getting ready to leave. If these people are as dangerous as you say, we need a security protocol. He checks in with me every 12 hours. If I don't hear from him, I take everything to the police. I agreed, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. The less official involvement, the better. At least until I understood exactly what Marcus had done. That afternoon, I went back to Mrs. Chun and waited and planned, because now I had help. Real professional help, and in less than 24 hours, I would know exactly who had tried to kill me and why. But as I waited, a new cold realization crystallized in my mind. Marcus wasn't just greedy. He was part of something bigger, something more systematic and dangerous than I had initially realized. And tomorrow, I would find out exactly how deep that rabbit hole really went. Danny Crawford was worth every penny I had paid him. By the end of the second day, he had more information about Marcus's activities than I had learned in months of living with them. His brother has been very busy since you supposedly died, Danny said, spreading photographs across Mrs. Chen's kitchen table. Multiple meetings with lawyers, 2 visits to the bank, and 3 separate trips to a private medical facility outside Boston. Medical facility? Whitmore Reproductive Services. Very exclusive, very expensive, and very discreet. Danny pointed to a photo of Marcus entering a modern glass building. They specialize in surrogacy arrangements for wealthy clients who want to maintain privacy. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed turned my stomach. He bought a baby. It looks that way. And not just any baby. According to my contact at Whitmore, the arrangements were made 8 months ago, paid for in cash with instructions to have the birth certificate pre-prepared. Ms. Chen sat down with 3 cups of coffee and joined us at the table. So he planned his death, bought a baby to inherit her fortune, and had someone inside her financial team helping her. About that, Danny said, pulling out another photo. I think I found MT. The photo showed a woman in her 40s with short auburn hair and an expensive briefcase shaking hands with Marcus outside a downtown law office. She looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place her. Miranda Torres, Danny continued, partner at Morrison Torres and Associates. They handle estate planning for several prominent Boston families. Torres is married to Michael Torres. Torres, I repeated. Wait, Michael Torres is his accountant. Are they related? Married. And here's where it gets interesting. Miranda Torres has been quietly building a client base of wealthy elderly individuals with strained family relationships. She specializes in what she calls family transition planning. I stared at the photo, recognition finally dawning. I met her about 6 months ago at some charity function Marcus dragged me to. She was very interested in my estate planning. She kept asking questions about my trust structures. I bet she did, because Miranda Torres has a very specific business model. She identifies elderly clients with substantial assets and estranged families, then helps the families accelerate their inheritance through what she calls compassionate intervention. You mean murder, Ms. Chen said bluntly. I mean she creates legal structures that allow families to take control of assets while the elderly person is still alive using claims of incompetence, dementia, or diminished capacity. She's done this at least 6 times in the last 3 years. Danny spread out more photos, surveillance images of Miranda Torres meeting with different families, entering various law offices, visiting what appeared to be private medical facilities. She's running an entire operation. She finds wealthy elderly people with greedy relatives, helps orchestrate evidence of mental decline, provides legal cover for asset transfers, and takes a substantial portion of the inheritance. What if the elderly person refuses to cooperate or becomes suspicious? They have accidents. Falls down stairs, medication overdoses, boating accidents. Always tragic, always plausibly accidental, and always financially convenient for the surviving family. I felt sick. How many people has she killed? That I can prove? None. That I suspect? At least a dozen in the last 5 years. She's very good at covering her tracks, and she only works with families who can provide plausible alternative explanations for his relatives' deaths. I got up and walked over to Mrs. Chen's window, looking out at the ocean. A week ago, I was a grieving brother trying to maintain a relationship with his only family. Now I was a surviving murder victim, discovering that Marcus was part of a larger criminal enterprise targeting elderly people. There's something else, Danny said gently. About the baby. I turned back to face him. The biological mother was a 17-year-old girl named Jennifer Collins. Runaway from Maine. No family, no support system. Miranda Torres found her at a shelter in Portland and offered her $50,000 to carry a baby for a loving couple who couldn't have children. Where is she now? Danny's expression was grim. According to medical records, she died of complications during childbirth. But I spoke to a nurse at Whitmore who remembers Jennifer. Healthy girl, no risk factors, normal pregnancy until the day she gave birth. The implication hung in the air like smoke. They killed her. I think so, but I can't prove it yet. What I can prove is that his brother and Marcus are part of a criminal organization that has been systematically murdering elderly people for money. And tomorrow morning, he's meeting with Miranda Torres to finalize the legal transfer of her assets. I sat back, my mind racing. Where? Torres' office downtown. 10 in the morning. I looked at Mrs. Chun, then at Danny, then at the photos scattered across the table showing my brother shaking hands with a professional killer. Then I thought of the innocent baby, now orphaned because of Marcus' greed, being raised by people who killed her mother. Then it's time for Margaret Harrison to rise from the dead, I said. The hardest part about planning his return from the dead is deciding which audience gets the shock first. I could confront Marcus privately, giving him a chance to explain himself, but that assumed he deserved an explanation. Or I could make my resurrection public, letting him find out she was alive the same way the rest of the world would. I chose option 3, strategic haunting. What do you want? Danny asked when I explained my plan. I want them to know I'm alive, but not how much I know about his operation. I want them scared, off balance, making mistakes. Mrs. Chun nodded approvingly. Psychological warfare. I like that. The plan was simple but effective. While Marcus and Miranda Torres were at her meeting downtown dividing up my assets, I would be at his house leaving subtle evidence of my presence. Little touches that would make him question his sanity before accepting that I had survived. Danny had discovered that they kept the baby at Marcus's house during the day with a private nurse who had been hired through one of Miranda Torres's front companies. The nurse, a woman named Carol Peterson, had no idea she was caring for a baby who had essentially been purchased through the death of his teenage mother. Carol is a good person, Danny assured me after doing a background check. Single mother, nursing degree, clean record. She probably thinks she's helping a legitimate family with childcare. Then she deserves to know the truth. That morning, while Marcus was downtown legally erasing me from existence, I was at the front door of my old house ringing the doorbell. The next few minutes would determine whether my psychological warfare would work or whether I would end up having to run for my life again. But as Carol Peterson opened the door, holding a baby bottle and wearing scrubs covered in cartoon animals, I knew I had made the right decision. It was time for Leo Harrison to return from the dead and show Marcus exactly what happens when you underestimate an older brother who refuses to die quietly. The real battle was just beginning, and this time, I controlled the battlefield. Carol Peterson turned pale when I opened the door. She knew me by the name that had been splashed across the newspapers for a week. The wealthy widow who died in a helicopter crash. "Can I help you?" she asked, holding a baby bottle. "Hello, Carol. My name is Leo Harrison. I believe you're taking care of his nephew." Carol backed away, still staring at me as if I really were a ghost. In the stroller was the baby, maybe 3 weeks old, with dark hair and serious eyes. My heart ached at the sight of this innocent child at the center of this conspiracy. "What's his name?" I asked, kneeling down next to the stroller. "Baby Harrison," Carol said automatically. "I mean, they said the name would be Robert Jr., but they haven't decided yet." They haven't decided because they don't know him well enough to name him. Because he's not really his son, is he? I showed Carol the photos Danny had taken, the documents I had copied from Marcus's office, the evidence of Miranda Torres's criminal operation. I watched her expression change from disbelief to horror as the extent of the conspiracy became clear. "The teenage girl who gave birth to this baby was named Jennifer Collins," I said softly. "She was 17, with no family. They said she was helping a loving couple. She died during childbirth under suspicious circumstances." Carol was crying now. "He's an orphan." "Yes. And if Marcus gets away with it, he'll grow up thinking they're his parents, never knowing that her real mother died to give him life." I spent an hour with Carol and baby Robert Jennifer, taking photos, documenting the setup in my old house. Carol agreed to continue caring for the baby while I secretly gathered evidence. "They'll be back around noon," she told me as I got ready to leave. "He always comes for lunch to check on him." Perfect. By then, they'll have received my first message. While I was talking to Carol, Danny was busy downtown. He positioned himself across from Miranda Torres's office building with a telephoto lens, photographing Marcus entering the building, meeting with Torres, and shaking hands over what they thought was his legal death certificate. But the real gift was what Jake delivered to the lawyer's office while they were in the meeting. I had written a simple note on elegant letterhead. "Dear Marcus, Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. We need to talk. Love, Leo. P.S. Give my regards to little Robert Jennifer. He's gorgeous. According to Danny, who was watching from the street, the three of them ran out of the building minutes after receiving the note, his face white with panic. The psychological warfare had begun. That afternoon, when they returned to my old house, expecting to find her cozy conspiracy intact, they would discover that her supposed dead victim had been very busy. Because I wasn't just alive. I was furious, armed with evidence, and ready for war. I was sitting in my favorite armchair when Marcus opened the door. The same one Robert had bought me on our 20th wedding anniversary. The look on his face was worth 6 days on the frozen lake. "Hello, dear," I said calmly, without getting up. "How was his meeting? I hope they didn't sign anything important while I was away." Marcus stopped at the door as if he had hit an invisible wall. His face turned white as a sheet. "Leo," he stammered. How did you survive?" "Yes, what a surprise. It turns out drowning is harder than it looks, especially when there are good people around to fish older brothers out of the water." She smiled coldly. "Sit down, Marcus. We have a lot to talk about." At that moment, FBI agents burst through all the doors simultaneously. Danny Crawford, Agent Crawford, took out his badge as he read Miranda Torres her rights. "Marcus Harrison, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and elder abuse," Agent Chen announced. Over the next few months, Miranda Torres' criminal network was completely dismantled. 17 co-conspirators were arrested, including corrupt medical examiners and probate attorneys. The investigation revealed that the operation had stolen more than $200 million from elderly victims in 6 states. Marcus got 25 years. Miranda Torres received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. But the most important outcome was baby Robert Jennifer. I legally adopted him with the full support of the judicial system and the extended family of Jennifer Collins, found in Canada. They were grateful that someone was willing to raise Jennifer's son and tell the truth about her courageous young mother. "His real name is Robert Jennifer Harrison," I explained to the family court judge. "Robert after his grandfather, Jennifer after her biological mother, and Harrison because this is the family that will love him and raise him with the truth about where he came from." Today, at 77, 5 years later, Robert Jennifer is a remarkable little boy who knows exactly who he is and where he came from. He knows that his biological mother was a brave teenager named Jennifer who wanted him to have a good life. He knows that sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones we need to protect ourselves from. Marcus is still in prison. He writes me letters sometimes, trying to explain why he did what he did, asking for forgiveness, claiming he was manipulated. I don't respond. Because I learned something during my week as a dead man. Family isn't about blood or obligation or inheritance. It's about showing up when someone needs you, protecting the vulnerable, and choosing love over greed every day. Robert Jennifer and his family have that kind of family now. The kind where no one is thrown out of helicopters, no one steals trust funds, and no one has to die so someone else can get rich. It's a much better family than the one he was born into, and definitely better than the one he created. If this story of family betrayal turned into justice touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share in the comments, because the truth always wins in the end. Her voice matters. The last I heard from Marcus, he was still learning that some falls are necessary to discover who we really are. Me? Well, I discovered that surviving your own death may be the best gift life has to offer.